He is the king of prime time, Ghana's undisputed entertainment laureate, and still the youngest old man in Ghana. Put your hands together, show some love for the indefatigable KSM.
The KSM Show.
All right, folks. I tell you this all the time, man, why I like my job. Because it's the only job that gives me the audacity to go to people's houses and their offices and then introduce them as guests to my show. And today, the guests I have, you know, I always tell you guys that I'm going to be retiring soon. But before I retire, I want some bragging rights. And this bragging rights is going to happen today because I'm going to be known as the only person so far, maybe after me somebody else will try it, but the only person so far who has interviewed what I choose to call a power couple, but they don't like the word power. Intentional power couple. I just say an influential couple. And folks, today I'm in the house of the legal colossus. I'm in the house of the legal colossus, the man we know as the law, Mr. Chachuchikata, and his wife, who is a communications strategist and a colossus in communications. Show them love for Mr. and Mrs. I almost said Mr. and Mrs. Chachuchikata, but you are not Mrs. Chachuchikata. You are going by your maiden name.
Yes, I'm
Esther Cobbah.
Sometimes.
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 Well, first of all, let me thank you for the honor for being the first person to interview you as a couple ever. Me that's it. But my first question is going to, you know how they say ladies first. So my first question is going to go to the lady. Esther, you are married to this legal colossus, your friend Chachuchikata. Isn't it part of your bragging rights? Say, we are Mrs. Chachuchikata. Why Esther Cobbah?
Wa kweku Esther Amba Numaba Cobbah.
But you need
literature, you say alliteration. Esther Amba Numaba Cobbah.
Oh.
Ba. And he also likes the name. He likes my name. Obi Penua some beside to say, why doesn't she use your name? In fact, he answered for me.
Oh, and what did he say?
He said, I have the woman. What do I need the name for?
I have the woman. So what do I need? A legal luminary, Mr. Chachuchikata. How does it feel to have this woman?
Well, those are my bragging rights. Yeah, blessed.
Fantastic.
And I must tell you that there was a day that during my time in prison, my big brother Kojo, captain,
yes,
who is regarded as a man of few words. So one day, when he came to visit me in prison, he said, oh, he'd like to have a meeting with Esther. And perhaps his brother, who was then alive, may he rest in peace, his brother was there, and he'd like to meet the two of them. And so when I told Esther that, oh, Captain was meeting with you, she was a little petrified. But the truth is that Captain wanted to meet him with a brother to express his deep appreciation for all that she was doing, standing by me during that very difficult time.
Oh, put your hands together for me. Wow.
And the truth is, I mean, you know, this is not perhaps something that people know. She had her own company to run, but she went out of her way, well beyond what a wife is normally required. So that's why I'm saying I'm blessed.
It's good you've asked
blessed.
this question. You've made this statement because it leads me to my next question. Listen, we know Chachu was in jail and it was all about Chachu them, Chachu, you know. But who was thinking about what the wife went through? Can you recollect from the time you heard that he's been sent to jail and your immediate reaction?
I don't remember thinking about myself. Or if I thought about myself, it was in connection with the joy I would have to see him free. But it was all about him. It was, now that you ask me, I actually realized that I didn't really once stop to think I'm tired or I wasn't eating well.
I'm talking about the first day. Who called you? How did you hear?
Oh.
Because I hear he told you, so Mikwaba. Little did you know.
We had our quiet time. It was a beautiful scripture from Genesis.
Okay.
And we then were discussing something, and he said, oh, I'm just going to take a date and come back. And I understood, because I wasn't going to court with him normally, because I told him that one of us has to work.
Okay.
So that we can feed ourselves.
Yeah.
Seriously, because he was going to court all the time. And at that time, he hardly, there was hardly anything that he would sort of be allowed to do in Ghana. So I had to take my work very seriously. So both of us couldn't go and sit in court. But there was one day that he told me that there was likely to be a judgment. So I went with him, and my big brother was with me. My big brother came from Germany to settle in Ghana, and he was practicing. But once Chachu was thrown into jail, he stopped work. He said he could not continue to work when his brother and friend was in jail. So we went, and when we went, the judge said that she was waiting for a decision from the Supreme Court to enable him to decide, to determine the case. So I knew this. And for about a year or two, he would just go and be given a date, and he would come back because the Supreme Court had not decided on that aspect of the case. So whenever he said, I knew
He'll be back.
But this was a little peculiar because he would usually go around at 9, but this time it was early. It wasn't even 8, and he said the judge had said he should go that early. So he went, and I was home. Then I received a call from his younger sister that your husband is going to prison. And I said, really? So he said the judgment is being read, but I said his lawyer is not in, and he said, but it's being read. So I just got up and drove to court. And when I got there were police men all over, prison officers. The courts, it looked like something was going on. But I went in and I saw Chachu standing there defending himself. And he had his little blue diary, and he was telling the judge that, but I don't have the brief and my lawyer is not here. And he said, but Mr. Chikata, you are a lawyer. You can defend yourself. And I found it a bit awkward because with the little law that I've learned through conversations and all that, I knew that every citizen has a right to a lawyer, even if a person is a lawyer. So I sat there and I watched him. And but my brother, he was going to court with him all the time. So I sat beside him. And I just listened. And he said, you will go to court, you will go to prison. And so he was going to prison.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I sat there, and I always tell my family and friends, I said, I have a choice to be very angry and resentful, or to ask God to use this for something. And that if I became resentful, it would paralyze me. And I would, because in my nature, I can't be resentful.
So this is what you decided then in the courtroom?
Yes.
How to position yourself?
Yes, yes. So I got up and I followed him downstairs. I didn't know what he was going to do. Then I went and found Chachu standing in the registry or whatever they call that place, writing his appeal. He stood on his feet and he wrote plenty English.
And you are just watching him then?
I was watching him and holding off the police.
They wanted to go get him?
They wanted him to messing. And so I said, he's not going anywhere. This man for how many years has been reporting to you. And I know, Chachu, if a court has sentenced him, even if they left all the doors and windows open,
He won't go.
because it will be illegal for him to move out, he won't go. He will. So I said, take your time.
He won't
And
go
that's
anywhere.
what I was doing. And now thinking back, sometimes I'm amazed at what, strength I had to.
Wow.
Yeah. So he finished.
Wow.
And then they put him in a four-wheel drive. And I sat in my car. And a journalist came to me with his mic and asked me, so how do you feel? And all that came out of me was, God is watching.
God is watching.
Yes. And when I said God is watching, what I meant was that if Chachu is guilty, God is watching him and he will reveal it. And whatever else anybody was doing, God was watching.
Wow.
So they moved him, I followed, and I missed them. And then I went to the police headquarters to look for him, and they said he wasn't there. And they told me I should go to the CID headquarters. So I went to the CID headquarters, and I asked for Chachu. He had been thrown into counterback.
At the CID headquarters?
Yes, with everybody else that was in there. But just when I got it there, they were bringing him
Out.
to come and fill the papers for prison. And so he came, and that time they allowed me to sit with him to fill the papers. And guess what? They asked him, what does he do in his free time? And I said, let me answer that. I said, he sits and he watches me and enjoys being with me. Now that you are taking him away, what is he going to do? I think the man thought this one is crazy.
Wow. But quickly, I'll come back to you. So, Mr. Chikata, can I call you Chachu? Of course. Okay. So, Chachu, you go, you think you're just going for a date? You go and they slam you in jail? What was going through your mind? I know you are tempted to say your lie was not there.
Yeah, I mean, I tried a lot of talking back to the judge to remind her that she had decided that she would wait until the appeal processes, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court were done. And then I even pointed out that the Supreme Court had set the following week as the date for their decision. So there was, there was going to be a decision from the Supreme Court the following week. So I couldn't figure out why it was necessary that day. But of course, the powers that be had decided that I needed to be in prison. But, it was a little bit confusing at the start, dealing with the situation. But I also recognized that this was something that had been orchestrated, especially with me having to come to court early I didn't notice that the police and the
So
prison
when they asked you to
officers
come early, did that strike you as
at
odd,
all.
or
No,
you?
I didn't think much of it because sometimes, you know, when judges want to fit a case in, they will ask, you know, you to come early so that they get it out of the way. Then they deal with the normal cases and so on and so on. So I didn't think much of it, but that was a different agenda that day. But looking back, it's quite fun.
So when it became clear to you, say, Oko jail, Oko prison, what then did you go through then? You.
I don't know. You know, I guess my defense system mechanism is not to be resentful or to be bitter about situations.
But normally you get resentful and you get angry and you go through all the human emotions, and then after that you can calm down and think.
Yeah,
But
I think
what is
my
going
mother,
on?
my mother was a very loving person, and she taught us how to love. And so, my big brother, actually, when he came to Ghana, he had a band. We love music. He had a band, and he called it unconditional love. To describe the love, the kind of love that my mother had. And if you go to my mother's grave in Komenda, what we have put on it is, Ma, the love you sowed in us still grows. She trained us to love. So when I realized that he was going to jail, I sent the driver to go home and get pillow, blanket, bed sheet. Because I had heard that long ago people would be put in detention. So I thought that it was that kind of thing that was going to happen. So I went out. Then the person who was doing the form said I should step out for a minute. So I stepped out, and then somebody came and told me that maybe I can take the lead to Nsamom. So I asked, but what am I going to do there when I get there? Then somebody, a prison officer, a woman, said, God will send his angels ahead of you to help you. So I got into my car and I went and I stood there waiting for Chachu to come.
How long did you wait?
Oh, I waited for about an hour, 2 hours. Yeah. So I was, but when I got there, I was with somebody who I work with, who has been with us for a long time, Adumwa. Just when we were getting there, he said, "Hey, na padine ilele, you know, look at this gentleman, I know him." I said, "Really?" So when we got down, we asked him, "Hey, what are you doing?" Yes, "I'm waiting for the old man." He was a prison officer, and he was waiting. Remember, I had been told God will send his angels. So that was comforting. So I stood there waiting for the 4-wheel drive that took Chachu to the CID headquarters. Then I saw, you know, the big blue prison van with check, the huge one that they put the prisoners in, and you see them standing. I saw one driving, and they opened the prison, then some big gate, and it's backed in. And so I'm still standing there waiting for Chachu. Then somebody comes to call me that I should come. And I said, "What for?" They said, "Come, Chachu is in." I said, "Oh, but how did he get in?" He was brought in alone in that prison van. Alone.
Wow.
Standing in that prison
In the van.
Yes. So these days when I see it, anyway.
Wow.
So I go in there and he's out. And they say he should bring his watch. And I said, "You've asked the wrong man. He should bring his money." I said, "He doesn't have money in it." They thought I was kidding. But I said, "He doesn't have a watch." when he's sitting with you like this, he looks at your watch to
tell
tell
the
you
time.
the time. Yes. So he doesn't. I had bought him a watch, and the strap got torn. He said I shouldn't bother anymore. So he didn't. They said you declare your assets. That's what they call it. So, and then I said, oh, can I go and make his bed and prepare his room? And they said, Ewahi, no,
It's not the hotel.
this is not where. Apparently, he was going into a cell with 10 other people.
10 other people.
Yes.
Wow.
So he went.
So, Chachu, this big van, and you're riding in it alone from Accra to Nsum. What are you thinking as?
So, I mean, by then I had recognized what the agenda was. I was going to be in a new home. So I adapted to that. And truly,
Wow.
by the time I got in, you know, and eventually got into a cell, the surroundings at Nsum were very comforting. You know, the hills around there. And I could hear the birds also singing in the evening, because by then it was already getting quite late, you know, 5, 6 p.m. So, and I remember some of the words that came from scripture to me were that you don't worry about those who can only harm your body, you know. It's those who can do damage to your spirit, you know. So no, I think I was at ease by that time, and you know, that was going to be a new experience.
The following morning, waking up, knowing you are
in prison.
This is real now. I'm in prison.
Yeah. As I said, I really felt at ease, honestly.
Wow.
And so the first Sunday, so this would have been like, I think June 18th may have been a Wednesday, but the first Sunday when I go to church, the United Church in the prison, a pastor comes from Asamankesi to preach. And just before he gets up to preach, he asks a young lady to minister in song. So the young lady gets up, and guess what she says? You are in the right place at the right time.
That's the song?
No, before she gets into her song,
that's what she says.
She says, you are in the right place at the right time. And I knew she was right.
Wow. Wow.
And then the minister, the pastor, you know, preached an amazing sermon. I always talk about
yes,
it. He uses Genesis 50:20, Joseph saying to his brethren, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good.
Wow.
And he was talking to me. And it was almost as if, you know, he knew that I would be there that day. It was amazing.
Wow.
It was just amazing. Wow. And so we thank God for even that experience.
Let me back it up a little bit, because you saw then, before you got there, that there's an agenda. The way you came up earlier and everything, there was an agenda. Is this something that happens in the courts? Because the judiciary, is it? They are supposed to be the bastion of integrity on truth and everything. Can somebody like me say, you cannot always trust the courts based on this agenda?
Well, you know, one of my clients in recent years has kept asking me, do you still trust the courts? You know, but my answer to him, first of all, is that I don't have an alternative. but seriously, I think that by and large, if we are to maintain a system of social order and, you know, have institutions to work and so on, we've got to act on the basis that they will be run by people who want to do the right thing according to the laws, according to the systems and so on. But we are human. And within a human context, we've just got to know that there is often a manipulation of the system for an agenda that may not be visible immediately, but when you go behind the surface, that becomes very clear. And it became very clear to me, as I said, from seeing what was happening in the courtroom and then just thinking back, and subsequently it was confirmed completely. You know, we are in a small society. I mean, even some of the people who were used as, you know, tools for this would later, you know, acknowledge that they had been used for this. You know, they were suddenly called up, you know, even the police investigators and so on, they were called up suddenly to come. They didn't know what was going to happen, and suddenly it happened as it happened. So I'm trying to answer your question, not necessarily in a diplomatic way, but in an honest way. What I want to say is that we have to have trust in our institutions. But at the same time, we have to recognize that human beings who run them sometimes deviate and go on their own agenda, an agenda which is not what is expected of them. I mean, with my background, not just as a lawyer, but if you like, as a sort of activist for, you know, social justice and so on, I always look to see how the system can work to achieve that end of justice, because I think that we've got to keep striving to make that happen.
I like the word, you've got to keep striving, but you're still striving knowing that it's a human institution. So how confidence is the striving?
Yeah, you see, you strive because your striving becomes part of the record. It becomes part of the record which other people can make reference to. And in the end, in my story, I was acquitted and discharged. It took another 8 and a bit years. But in the end, I was acquitted and discharged because we kept striving. My lawyer kept striving. And in the end, 2016, 30th of November, the Court of Appeal acquitted and discharged me. So, I mean, the story ended well, but it could have ended otherwise. I could have died in prison.
And we'll get to that, because you almost did die in prison. But Esther, this is what I remember, and people were, I think, they were, at some point, they say, oh, Ghana with the Mandela, no. So Mandela was sentenced, and Winnie kept the fire, and on and on and on. And we were compared to her in that extent, when Chachu was in jail, free Chachu movement, you know, you're so active.
Yeah, I as Chachu was talking, I was actually recalling one of the reasons why I did that. It wasn't only to free Chachu, but to free the public from ignorance with regard to the law. Because I feel that the law, the courts, people are afraid. And I remember during that time we'd be told that the case is in court. You can't talk about it in the media. But I went into the Constitution, and the first thing it says is that it is what do you call it? Justice is it's administered by the court on behalf of the people. I read it, you know. So I felt, if this is on my behalf, and the case is Chachu Chikata versus the Republic, then the people in the Republic need to know the facts. It can't just be kept under the wigs of a few people who, as Chachu has rightly said, are human. Let's bring the case out. So I did everything from putting the facts as I understood them, and that's where I brought in my own professional knowledge and, you know, capabilities. I put the facts on handkerchiefs because Ghanaians, we like handkerchief for birthday, for funeral, for everything. So 14 reasons why Chachu Chikata should not be in jail. On bookmarks, and then we went out to speak. I wanted people to ask questions, to understand the case, because the case was in their name. Even though the first summons was in the name of the president. So it was, that time, it was a matter between him and the then president. I think the court, that was corrected because Chachu challenged that. But eventually, it was Chachu versus the Republic. And you are part of the Republic. And I would speak to people who didn't understand the case. Up till now, there are people who don't understand the case. So I was using that also to get the Republic, the people to understand it, so that sometimes, I mean, we can ask questions. And so it was really nice when sometimes we were in the Supreme Court and these fearful judges who would decide Chachu's fate were sitting there, and they would order in court, you know, they would silence all of us, and a handful of ordinary Ghanaians, in between statements, you would hear them say, Chachu Gode o, Chachu Gode o. For me, they had analyzed the case, they had understood it, and that was their response. And then I went to my hometown to share the facts of the case with my extended family. And at that time, the Ebusuapanyin got up in the middle of the case and said in Fanti, Maba, Echrede, Asamesi, ma was asam ne fambi was called mine ho. Or mine mbu asam ni wie. Ina me Ebusuapanyin miss me bu ewie. Ebe, at our way one cran na. So I had, what it means is that the head of my extended family, once he heard the case, he said, so what you mean is that an aspect of the case has happened at home here, and an aspect of it has been taken to the paramount chief. Whilst we are waiting for him to decide what has been brought before him, I, the Ebusuapanyin family head, I take a decision. And for me, that was solid. I had broken it down. I grew up in Komenda. I went to Komenda Local Authority Primary School. I probably wouldn't have understood it if I hadn't come to Accra, if I hadn't been married to Chachu. So I thought that people on the streets should understand, so that when they go to court, they will ask questions. It's like when we go to our medical doctors, we don't ask questions. And we come back home and all sorts of things happen to us. So it wasn't only to free Chachu, it was also to free us from the bondage of institutional, I don't even know how to say it. You know, a Ghanaian will dress up to go to the hospital because they are going to an institution. We'll dress up to go to a post office because we are going to an institution. We are afraid of lawyers. So I actually did say, and I may get into trouble for saying this in public to Chachu, that I come and sit in court and having heard the case, knowing the facts of the case, and I hear some of the things going on. Unfortunately, sometimes it looked like a concert party. It looked like things were just being done, parts were being played it was an orchestration. So being a communication professional, I felt I owed it to my, other people in the Republic to use my expertise to break it down. And that was actually the reason why I studied communication for developing nations. Because I felt that our democracy, our economy, all these things will not grow the way we want them to grow if only a few people understand it and manipulate it. So this was my opportunity. And that is why, for instance, I developed the documentary, The Albatross. And I brought it to my Christian belief, my Christian faith, that the Bible says, be anxious for nothing, in everything by prayer and supplication. Let your requests be known to God with thanksgiving, by prayer and supplication, and with thanksgiving. So I put my matter before God. Then I decided to thank Him. So as part of the campaign, I held a praise vigil every month because I said to God, I have put my matter before you, and I know you know. And therefore, I'm thanking you for the outcome. And really, whatever the outcome was, whatever, it probably may not have been what I wanted, but I was thanking Him. So, and that was also, that kept me strong, that kept me going. I mean, my faith really
We're
kept
going to be
me
talking
going.
about your faith and your relationship with God and how it played a role in everything. But before we get there, Chachu, you've been called all sorts of names, legal luminary, they have called you the law. What haven't they said about your contributions to the law? And having gone through all of this, and I was listening to your speech you gave at the honorific, which, by the way, a little joke, at my age, my eyes sometimes they give up on me, man. So I was watching the screen and I saw horrific. That is horrific. I'm like, what's going on here? So I had to put this on honorific, you know. You did make a statement regarding that you hope that what happened to you never happens to anybody. Nobody should be picked up from a church. Nobody should go through what you went through, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So being this legal luminary, being the law, does it frighten you a bit that these things still happen and possibly will continue happening for a while? And what's your...
Well, sadly, it is a worry that I have. And as I sometimes put it, the timing in Soham, for instance, showed me how many people in the prison at that time really were just helpless victims of a system.
Yeah.
Because some people were there, they'd been there for years on remand, which is completely contrary to what the law, the Constitution provides for. You know, there was a 16-year-old in the same cell with me. 16-year-olds should not be in an adult prison. But that was the reality. I saw a lot of other people on remand. They'd been there for years. I mean, these are not the normal processes that the law should take people through. And then I saw myself with all my legal, support base and with my wife's campaign and so on. I was in a very advantageous position compared to them. And so this gave me fresh insights. And I like to say that that was a new law faculty that I went through at the University of Nsawam. Exactly. But it also enables one to see something quite important from a national perspective, which is that you ask yourself, so what is the experience that ordinary people have of the law and the legal system? Because as Esther is saying, a lot of people may not have even understood some of the things related to my case because, of course, there was an intense government effort to paint me as a criminal. I had caused financial loss and so on and so forth. So there won't be time for people to go through the evidence, find out whether the application of the law is right. At one stage they try to apply a law retroactively to charge me with a crime. People are not going to go into all that unless their attention is focused on those issues. And I think that's where the communication aspect also became so important, you know. And by the way, that also gave me some interesting insights as a lawyer. You know, when I go to court as an advocate, what I'm doing there is a communication process. I'm now teaching you some of the lessons that I've learned from my wife. I go as an advocate communicating with the judge. And if I don't appreciate all the nuances of that communication so that I do it in an effective manner, forget it. Because the judge, a lot of what I might say will just go past them. So I've even my advocacy has been helped by my communication strategy wife.
Very, very interesting. Leads me to this question. What have you learned from each other? I mean, you look like you're so cool. More fights. Do you have your disagreements?
Oh, yes.
And does he always win using law? Or you use your communications too?
He tries to use big words. And I go to him with my simple words and deal with the matter. But I mean, yeah, we do have disagreements and we do have differences. But the important thing is what binds us together and what we believe, and that is deep. I can't even begin to describe it. I don't understand it myself. So that enables us to, you know, get along. I mean, we have domestic disagreements, and sometimes it's also how do I deal with some of the things that he is passionate about and I'm passionate about, but he deals with it a certain way, I deal with it a certain way. So, but we find ways, and we're here.
I like that. I have to ask you this, Chachu, especially knowing that this is a human institution, you know, and I want to get this from the lawyer, you know. How much trust and confidence can we have? Of late, there's this, if I should throw it in here, oral. And the frustration of people is that the courts are too slow. And the president himself has said that the wheels of justice grind slowly.
Mr. Speaker, I understand that a large majority of Ghanaians are impatient to see those who abuse their public trust in office held to account. As President Mills of blessed memory said, he said, and I quote, "The wheels of justice grind slowly."
Is this for all of us to accept that, well, those are the wheels of justice? Or coming from where you are, from the point of a colossus like you,
Forget the colossus.
forget the colossus.
But just let me express it in terms of just some of my general observations from the point of view of my experience of legal process. Now, first of all, the president is right. The wheels of justice often grind slowly. But I think what is also important is that those who are kind of grinding those wheels have to instill confidence in what they are doing. They've got to let people appreciate why the wheels are grinding slowly. So for instance, you talk about oral. The reason why people are concerned about oral, Operation Recover or Loot, is because there is a widespread recognition that resources of the nation have been looted by people misusing their positions of power. And sometimes people say this on the basis of visible evidence to them of, acquisitions made from the loot and so on, of properties, and people see what they regard as visible signs. So they want the institutions to be able to work to achieve justice for themselves as the people whose resources have been looted. So that's very legitimate. And I think it is necessary for lawyers and judges also to appreciate that perspective of the ordinary people. Now, at the same time, we lawyers particularly, we've got to break down, perhaps that's why we need some communications expertise. We've got to break down for people to understand what is involved at each stage of the process. For instance, there's a stage of investigation, of gathering evidence. And that gathering of evidence then leads to determining how to prosecute, what charges to lay, how the law is framed, and so on and so forth. Now, those require a lot of technical expertise. And sometimes, again, there are shortcomings. The Attorney General's Department, the staffing there is limited, And so when you have so many different cases that they have to deal with, they don't even have the human resources to be able to take on all those resources. So meanwhile, we the people are eager to see justice because we have seen the loot that has taken place, and so our passions about that are very legitimate. So in short, in terms of answering your direct question, I do have continued confidence in the fact that justice has to expose whatever has been looted. And that's why Esther saying God is watching was important, because if I was guilty of looting, I needed to be exposed. And equally, whoever has been involved in looting in terms of, and of course, the reason again why this is so passionate is because people almost feel that, one government comes, same thing, another government, same thing. So there isn't enough confidence that we are moving forward. It's almost as if there's an equalization going on as between different regimes and so on. So what I say, for instance, when I meet some young lawyers who are eager to talk about themselves as being, NDC oriented and so on, I also make it a point to highlight to them that yes, you can have your NDC political hat, but as a lawyer, you've got to have your discipline, your professional discipline of law, which in a way is irrespective of your political hat. And so frankly, I would like to keep encouraging young lawyers especially, whatever their political affiliation. This is important because if you're in the MPP and you're a lawyer, you must help your party to recognize that the law is meant to achieve justice for the people, because that enables the people to have confidence in you. If you're an NDC lawyer, equally, especially now when NDC is in power, you have even more of a responsibility to ensure that you do not have a situation where people begin to say, oh, the NDC people, they are just the same. Because you must hold your own people to account. You see what I mean? Because, as lawyers, we are in a position to at least identify some of these legal issues that come up, when governments are in power and so on. And we should hold ourselves accountable, within each party. I believe strongly that the lawyers within the respective parties should make sure that their party structures are held accountable, especially when they come into government.
I see this as the ideal thing you're talking about. What should happen? Is that happening though? Because I remember recently when we had to call the Supreme Court, what's it called, FC, unanimous FC or whatever reason.
Well,
what creates this, and how do we make sure that that doesn't keep recurring?
You see, I go back to my earlier answer in part, which is that the legal institutions are meant to achieve a degree of social order that gives us all a peaceful rest at night. And they are meant to ensure that there is justice administered for all. That's why the justice is administered, in the name of all the people. Now, you ask me a difficult question. Is it happening? Is it happening? And at each stage, yes, it is happening, but it is also not happening because there are still cases in which the right thing isn't being done because sometimes, the judges are politically manipulated. And we saw a lot of that, frankly, in the last government. I mean, there were decisions given, strange decisions. A court gets constituted to give some instructions to the Speaker of Parliament, on a Friday when the thing was filed in the morning, and by afternoon the court is constituted, and so on and so forth. I mean, those are blatant, and they tell us that something is happening which should not be the way it should be. But I think that by and large, we also have to more or less appeal to the consciences of the judges, particularly because they are in a very important position as far as, giving us confidence in what they're doing is concerned. I mean, I go to court and, sometimes I get very impressed by the delivery of judges as they, painstakingly give a ruling on a matter, and they go through all the legal precedents and so on. They analyze them, and so you can see that the capacity is there to do the right thing. And I can tell you, look, people, for instance, sometimes make reference to the fact that during the Rawlings period, for instance, there were decisions given against the government. June 4th should not be a holiday because it was a celebration of a coup d'etat and things like that. And they point out that the government didn't interfere. Those decisions were given. But sometimes it is rather under civilian regimes that you see more blatant interference with what should be the right course of action, as I personally experienced. But I think it's an ongoing struggle. It's a dialectic, as it were, in which, we still have to keep striving, as I've said before. We have to, and I believe that an important part of that striving should come from within the legal profession itself, because the legal profession has a very high level of responsibility for how the legal system gets administered, and we should sort of open ourselves also to lessons from the society at large.
So your message to the ordinary folk like us, should we keep our confidence, hoping that there's somebody there striving and that eventually?
No, that's not enough. I think my message, frankly, is for ordinary people also to get involved in holding the legal institutions accountable. That's actually my more important message. In other words, the more we all learn about legal processes, sometimes people worry that, aren't there too many lawyers being produced or whatever? But not all the lawyers have to be going to court day by day. I mean, if lawyers learn in order that they can educate the rest of the society, that itself is an important role. And for me, just as Esther was talking about, the Busiapenian and, the lesson that he took out of my experience breaking it after it was broken down, I think if we get more and more engagement of the society with legal process, a demystification in effect, a demystification of the law, and that is where I would hope that we get more and more people involvement, because it's being administered in their name, so they better get involved.
Demystification. You mentioned your sort of, I don't know how to put it, but you're not too happy, for example, that the Supreme Court will not allow you to question the Electoral Commission. Is this part of the striving thing that we should overcome?
Absolutely, because these are important things. Democracy involves electoral processes, and electoral processes have outcomes which are supposed to express the will of the people. So if the will of the people involves vote counting, for instance, and somehow for a particular election, the vote counting gets into multiple versions and, you know, different accounts of what happened, how you got this number or that number, you are actually undermining the whole democratic process. So for me, it's not just that I'm trying to criticize the Supreme Court, you know, that's not all there is. I'm also talking about the accountability of the Electoral Commission itself and the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. Because if she actually came forward, did an affidavit before the court, said, I am representing the Electoral Commission, this is how the election went, and she put that on paper for the court, then suddenly, when it comes to the time to be subjected to, you know, the normal process of a court being cross-examined and so on, then she says, no, I don't need to give evidence after all. You know, that is what creates a unanimous FC perspective that, you know, I mean, this is not serious, you know. So if we avoid as much as possible these things that undermine the whole democracy and so on.
My final question before I come to Esther, as you lawyers call something precedents, it's been done, they will quote whatever. So can this be a precedent for that some future electoral commissioner can refuse to testify?
Absolutely.
It's there?
That is part of the problem. It does serve as a precedent, but even beyond serving as a precedent, and it can be used, therefore, in a future situation to do similar injustice. Even beyond that, what I'm saying is that, you know, it makes people lose confidence in that voting process. Because then they feel, if my vote is not going to be reflected in the outcome that has been announced, or if one day it is said to be reflected in a certain number, and then the number changes the next day, and then it changes the next day, then the whole process becomes undermined. So even before another occasion when it might be used as a precedent, the whole democratic, you know, situation is undermined. And that is my worry, that we're creating for ourselves through that experience a diminishing regard for democracy. And that is serious. Because
that's worrying.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is what makes me somewhat scared about those kinds of examples. Because, you know, if people who are in the high offices of state, including judges and so on, if they can accept a situation which is leading to that diminishing regard for democracy, we'd better watch it, because in the end, it can damage us all, because it rather creates maybe respect for strong-arm tactics of a kind which may not be legally appropriate, but which, you know, some people might prefer.
Okay. This is just, by the way, you wanted to become a judge. It was a dream that you be. Somebody told me to ask you this, why did he not become a judge?
No, it wasn't so much a dream. I think it was a sort of childhood expression of respect for my late uncle, who became a very famous Chief Justice both in Ghana and in Kenya. But anyway, I mean, seriously, I think that those early childhood ambitions as a lawyer, it almost seemed like the natural progression from being a lawyer is to become a judge. And so I announced that to my interview panel for my UAC interview in December 59. But I think part of my own personal progression is that I began to see law in a broader context than just the context of administering justice in individual cases. I began to see law in the context of issues like natural resources, how to develop natural resources of the country, oil and gas and mineral. And so I got more involved in that broader dimension, you know, GMPC and all of that. And so that, you know, turned into a different path for me rather than being a judge. But I'm not disappointed that I didn't become a judge. I feel that it's not easy to be a judge. You know, there's a lot of focus on you as an individual and what you do in that role on that bench. You know, and I think I'm happy where I got to.
It should have been at least a Supreme Court judge. It should have. What do you feel about that? Should you have been on the Supreme Court?
I wouldn't have liked to be part of a unanimous FC.
So let me ask you this: getting married to this, I won't say legal luminary, to Chachu Chikata, who's known for the law. What do you have arguments bothering on whether the law was just or not just? Do you disagree with him sometimes on law issues or in your domestic, you know?
Oh, sometimes I encourage him to understand people. but no, I would say that for me, people describe Chachu as a legal brain. I describe him as somebody with a human heart that leads his legal brain. And so he gets very passionate about what is right and what especially people's rights, workers' rights, the rights of people in SAL. And the numbers that changed during the elections and stuff like that. And he works on it as if it's his personal something. And for me, it is not only knowledge that drives somebody to do that. It is the heart that somebody has behind that brain. And that is the heart that I am married to. I'm not married to a legal brain. I'm married to a heart that believes in justice.
That's interesting. You're not married to a legal brain.
No.
You're married to the heart that believes in justice.
Yes. I mean, he likes what is just. He likes what is correct. I mean, this is somebody who I'm told in an exam in Oxford would see that some questions that were in the exam needed to have been phrased differently. And he stops it because answering it would mean that he
accepts
accepting
the premise of the...
Yes. And that is something that I just admire about him, because deep down, that is what I also believe in. But there's an irony there. You know, this justice that, and the heart that is just wanting justice that I like, on the other hand, also puts us into a lot of trouble.
Like,
so
give me
I'm
a
married
good example of trouble that
So he will say it as it is, and people may wonder why is he doing that? And sometimes people even imagine that there's probably something in it for him. I remember after the election petition, somebody that I know coming, you know, seeing me somewhere and saying, "Hey, Auntie Esther, after Uncle Chachu went and did this thing, now the money has come." Meanwhile, there wasn't a penny.
Wow.
And just because he's fighting for justice, sometimes we get treated unjustly. You know, whether in business, in our private lives and all that. And one has to sit and weigh. And when you think about it, the greater good, the wider public, for whose sake, partly for whose sake, for instance, I did the Free Chachu campaign, because I thought Chachu's case would be an opportunity to protect our democracy, to explain the law to people, and for people not to be afraid of lawyers and judges, and for people not to see Chachu as a legal brain, but to see him as somebody with a heart for justice, which is the heart of God. God has a heart. He's a just God. And therefore, that's how we should be living. So I am married to a complicated situation. But I guess I deal with it.
You're going to say something.
I wanted to say that, I mean, Esther is being generous in talking about the trouble that she gets into sometimes because she's married to me.
Yeah.
But that's a reality. I mean, there was a time in this country when even her own work as a communication specialist was being interfered with from, high levels of political power
Because of you.
of me. And that's a reality also about our situation.
And
So I can-
people also think that, maybe when NDC is in power, Chachu is I'm so rich that I don't need work. So
Either way, she loses.
Either way, I'm losing. So people are saying, Auntie Esther, you're always working. I say, yeah, because I have to survive. I have to work.
But the additional point that I wanted to make is that we've also got to have a situation in this country where, somebody is married to Chachu Chikata, but she has her own life.
Yes.
Yeah.
She has her own professional life. And that needs to be respected. But you don't sort of lump the two things
Everything,
together.
yeah.
But that has happened, and that continues, unfortunately, to happen. And so it's complicated, as she says.
It is.
But she's
It is.
putting it in a very diplomatic language. But, when you break it down to the reality, and let me tell you, I mean, very frankly, she spoke about the situation, the first election petition, when somebody thought I had made a lot of money, which I hadn't. But when the 2021 election petition was about to start, I mean, I knew that I would have to be involved, but I felt it's also necessary to consult with my family, to ask her view, to sit with her and tell her what concerned me about the situation that we were in as a country. And fortunately, for me, she understood. And I mean, I don't really say this lightly, but she didn't understand it just as a wife is supposed to understand what her husband is doing. But I think she had her own sort of patriotic disposition about the good of the country, which made it easy for me and enabled me to be able to go out there and do what I had to do. But she pays a price, often.
And as I say, I mean, I had studied public relations and journalism at the School of Communication, but I went on to study communication for developing countries. And when I go back and read the purpose of study that I wrote, I feel satisfied that I took the right decision, because some of the reasons I gave was were like, the budget is read. It's read in English. And if it's being broken down, are we losing something? I mean, because I had grown up in Comenda, and what was it that was causing all the instability in the country at that time? Kwame Nkrumah had been overthrown, then a Champon came, and it goes down to people not understanding the democracy being for some people to rule some people, when it's actually the people ruling themselves. So for me, there's an urgency around using communication as a critical tool for development. Otherwise, we may stem out all our young people, females, males, have a whole hall of young lawyers graduate and all that. We won't get anywhere until communication has been used effectively to explain things to people. And that is why I also enjoy my marriage to Chachu, because I'm able to ask questions, probe, and I ask, and he better answer. And I get my answers, and that actually sometimes informs some of the communication strategies I put together. Because in the end, I have a certain goal, and my understanding of the national situation and sometimes the legal underpinnings help me to do my messaging in such a way that liberates our people. And I wish that we would have more of those things. Yes.
Wow. Put your hands together, man. Have an engaging session. My bragging rights, man. But wow, it's great. It's great. I have to wrap it up, but before I wrap it up, one final question for each of you. And let me start with you, because I said it with you. So the final question, what is it about Chachu that you have learned and you really adore and
You want me out before she answers?
No. I want you to hear it
Here comes
truthfully.
the bombshell. Here comes the bombshell. I mean, I learned it quite early. This is a man who believes in justice, and I enjoy that. Chachu carries a heavy load lightly. It may be heavy, it may be difficult, but he carries it in such a way that you wonder. But then, over time, you get to see that he doesn't carry it. He gives it to the person who created him and led him to the situation where a heavy load was created to carry it. And therefore, he's constantly going back to his God. And I mean, he actually helps me to strengthen my faith. This man has faith that sometimes I'm seeing, Chachu, can't you see? It's almost like it's not there, because he's focused. He's looking to his God. And when people come to him and they say, oh, bless me, give me, I say, this man, go to the source where he goes to. Because sometimes he has to go to court. He's dealing with a very heavy case. And this man is sitting there worshiping. And it may sound, and that makes me feel like, oh my goodness, the person that gives us our gifts also works with us to deploy the gifts to the benefit of the people around us. And when they benefit, they glorify him.
All right. Show some love, man. So your turn now. What have you found about Esther that... Go ahead.
Well, how much time do you have? I think I can summarize it in what happened at the UPSA event the other day. The reason why she had to give my concluding statement is because, not only because she has a good voice, which she has, thanks to her mother, but also because she's able to crystallize some of my thoughts and some of my passions in ways that are just amazing for me. I mean, Esther had to sing that same song, Amazing Grace,
Amazing Grace, yeah.
last year when my mother turned 100 at my request, because she's able to express the depths of my feeling about life and about society and so on. And I think because she enjoys her roots so much, you know, I always tell people that having learned to speak Fanti and Fanswim through my good friend Kwam Nanaman and people, I think I was ready to marry a Fanti. But I think she relishes her roots, where she came from, and she uses her roots in appreciating what is going on within the context that she's dealing with, whether it's a legal context that I describe or some other social context that she's dealing with. So there's been an incredible amount of synergy in our lives, you know, which I can only thank God for. And we have wonderful children and grandchildren who enable us to remain energetic. So we can only thank God for the blessings of our marriage.
I kept saying this is a funner question, but funner. Your relationship with God, both of you, seem like it's intense, you know, because in Chachu, you are also known as a communist. As a communist, so free. So, Esther, you tell me how is it that an alleged communist, Osunya Misa, who communist cafe? This is the first communist cafe I've seen. That's our final question before we leave here.
You know, the Bible says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And I think Chachu is a wise man. So he decided to be wise. So I mean, it's us.
Yes. You know, I think that people don't know that, I mean, I was in Scripture Union from Fansfim days.
Really?
And University Christian Fellowship and so on.
We go way back with the Griffey.
But the truth is that, as Fidel Castro once said, I mean, Jesus Christ was very interested to feed the 5,000. Yes. You know, so socialism, yes, seeks to feed the 5,000 and the 5 million and the 5 billion and so on. And I have found, again, a complete consistency between my socialism and my Christianity. And I think we have to have another interview around that whole issue of faith, because I know
saying that when I give food to the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why the poor have no food, they call me a communist. So, and I mean, yes, we should have a conversation again. I did the study of religions, and we looked at religion and socialism. And somebody was asking, was Jesus being a socialist when he whipped the guys in the synagogue, in the temple? That's what a socialist, they'll do a coup to get. He literally staged a coup in the temple. But it was for the poor. Who did Jesus come for? So name it whatever, you know. There is work that has to be done. And I guess we both recognize that.
Yep.
He through law, me through communications.
Put your hands together, man. Thank you so much for allowing me into your beautiful household with all these plants. And is that a parrot I'm hearing?
Yes. I have birds.
You have birds. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I really, really thank you. And for giving me the bragging rights. At least today, the American said, so far, dear, I'm the first to talk. Only me. Let it stay that way. No, I won't be selfish. Folks, this has been another edition of the KSM show. Okay. I have another one called Unfiltered. Okay. Folks, this has been another edition of the KSM show. And I'm telling you, these bragging rights, me fenia grow cry. But until we meet again, stay strong and join me to thank Chachu and Esther for their presence here. Show them one more time, and we will be back again. Hey, KSM out of here. Okay. And as I always sign out on the KSM show, can you guys help me with my sign out?
Yes.
It's like, until we meet again, we are out of here.
The KSM Show.